Hi, this is Dave Vanderveen. This is the KickAsspirational Podcast. And I am with Tony and Frances Pappalardo from New York, from Long Island, New York. Welcome, Tony and Frances.
Hello, Dave.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Happy to have you guys. It's been a very fun weekend. Tony and Frances and I work together. We're business associates, business partners through Access. And you guys are out here this weekend for the Brook Street competition. No, I'm joking. You're out here for a really great surf contest this weekend in Laguna, the Brook Street competition. But you guys are out here.
Someone we know made it to the finals.
Wow, I was very lucky to get through in the longboard.
Yeah, we're really proud of you.
Thanks.
Slayed it.
I need that. I'm a child still, but we two things. I live in Laguna Beach, and we have this great contest, the oldest surf contest on earth, called the Brook Street Classic, and this was, I think, the 55th one we've had since 1959. Really cool. Doesn't happen every year. We have to have the right conditions, but so that was really cool. And maybe we'll get Brandy Faber on to talk about that with us another time. But the real reason you're here, and we happen to kind of have an overlap with the contest that Access sponsors, is because of a fundraiser with Tahure, the Tahure Justice Center.
Yep.
And you guys have been fairly involved in philanthropy as well as building businesses and helping other people. And it was really great that you came out to support that as well. So thank you for joining us at our table, for bidding on items, and for being a part of it.
Yeah, it was our honor. It was really amazing to see you guys set a pretty big goal and then not just meet it, but crush it. I mean, you got double what you were expecting, and it was just awesome. So
yeah, it looks like we raised close to $500,000 tonight, which was really cool.
Yeah.
Incredible organization, incredible people behind it. It was just a really beautiful night.
Thank you. Yeah, Tahure, we'll probably post a link to it, but Tahure basically helps women who are escaping gender violence. So if they're escaping genital mutilation or rape or forced marriage, coming to America as refugees under American law, they have every right to come here, and we have an obligation to protect them. That's part of our immigration law. And Tahure helps them navigate that system, which is fairly complicated, 4 times more complicated than the U.S. tax code, apparently. So without Tahure, you have a 16% chance of getting admitted to the United States. With an attorney, you have 47% chance of getting admitted, and with Tahure, you have a 99% chance, or more than 90% chance of being admitted. So it's a very effective organization. All the money that they get gets amplified through their program, so it's a 4-to-1 return on the money you donate. And anyways, we've done some fundraising on my Facebook page, and of course we do direct fundraising through events and things we do with them. Sarah and I do, and it's great to have our business partners who join us at something so cool.
Yeah,
so,
it was a great event. It really was.
Thank you. I thought so too. But let's talk about you guys a little bit. So you're how old are you, both? Just so you don't mind me asking.
Frances is 31.
Whoa, Frances, how do you get out of bed in the morning?
Yeah. I'm 38 now. And I just like to kind of give Frances's age, and a lot of people don't ask about my age after I give hers, but figure for the program, it's good if I give my age as well. So
Frances is 31, and Tony, how old are you?
I'm 38, just to be clear.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
I know. It takes me quite a while. I mean, it's a challenge for her to get out of bed, but for me, it's near impossible.
Nearly impossible.
Yeah.
I want to move your mic a teeny bit. I think this will work better for both of you.
There we go.
For some reason. Still working out the kinks and the bugs on the KickAsspirational Podcast technology here. But what I would like to get into is kind of your histories and your business and how you work with a lot of people to help them. The KickAsspirational Podcast is about breaking through barriers in your own life and helping other people do the same thing. I think the stories, the questions that I got originally that kind of spawned this were people saying, how did you do it? How did you create Access? Which I really take to mean, how do I create the life I want to live? How do I create the world I want to live in?
Yep.
And it's hard. It's not easy. We're all given formulas when we grow up. We're told to follow this path, and good things will happen, and good things don't always happen. And even if good things do happen, it may not be the good things you're looking for. So we can talk about some of that. But tell us, maybe, if you don't mind, are you both from New York originally?
So I am originally from Alabama.
Alabama.
Yeah, I know I don't have the accent I just...
That's a hard sell, Francis. I don't hear it.
But yeah, I moved to New York about a little over 8 years ago now. So I am a permanent resident. I did not expect to be, but I am embracing it and loving it. And
How'd you end up in New York?
I moved there to pursue dance. I was a professional dancer. I started dancing when I was 15 professionally. And
when you say professional dancer, it could mean
I
a
know
lot
it's
of things.
a broad term. Yeah, really everything geared towards Broadway. So
good. That's what I was thinking.
Keep it PG.
Yeah. Not as many poles involved.
No, not a one. But yeah, I moved to New York for that reason. I was actually a tap dancer primarily.
Okay.
Did a lot of cool stuff with just some greats like Savion Glover and Gregory Hines and stuff like that growing up. Really fun. And that's ultimately what brought me to the Big Apple.
And Tony, what's your background? You're from New York originally, right?
Yeah, I'm from New York, born and raised, and
your last name's Pappalardo.
Yeah,
Is that Dutch Cherokee?
Jewish.
Or is that Jewish?
Yeah, it's a Jewish name. Pappalardowitz.
Pappalardo.
Yeah.
So very Italian.
Yeah.
There's a Pappalardo pizza company or something.
Yeah, and there's a famous skateboarder, professional skateboarder. It was kind of
shoes.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We're not related, but I actually worked with him at a surf shop growing up, so it's just kind of funny. I mean, two Anthony Pappalardos working together. It's not
the same entire name.
Yeah,
it's Anthony Pappalardo.
Yep.
Wow. Does he go by Anthony?
Yeah, he goes by Anthony.
Nice.
It's convenient when he wants to buy a pair of Converse All-Star sneakers with his name on it.
Yeah.
Name on it, because
there's an Anthony Pappalardo All-Star.
Already established.
Very cool.
Yeah.
There's no Dave Vanderveen All-Star. I mean, there is, but it doesn't. I have to put it on myself.
Well,
you can make it happen.
You just got to become a professional skateboarder like myself.
Exactly. So Tony and Francis, how'd you guys meet?
We actually
end up in business together.
Well, we actually met on Match.com.
And that's not a joke. You actually did.
Yeah, no, that's not a joke.
Is that because Tinder wasn't working, or what's going on?
Yeah, my Tinder account was broken.
It was pre-Tinder, wasn't it?
Yeah, it actually was.
Yep.
So which was good for Francis, because she would have been all over that. Not myself, but
Just don't swipe.
Yeah, exactly. So no, but we met on Match, and it was I kind of wasn't really even expecting anything from it because I kind of had a whole bunch of match dates that didn't go very well. So we had a great.
What did you do?
Nothing. I didn't do anything. It was just a lot of false advertising. So like the first date, I guess we could talk about it.
Okay, I have a friend who's in his late 40s, like me, who's single, who advertises that he's in his late 30s.
Yeah.
And then he meets girls, and they're like, "What is this time machine?" His music. He's a great guy. He's hilarious. And he has a girlfriend he's had for a long time now who's quite a bit younger.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Why did you lie about your age?" And he's like, "Well, if I had said I was in my 40s, would my profile have hit yours?" And she's like, "No." He goes, "See, that's why." Hilarious. I have no experience with dating apps, but I find the stories around them really, really curious. So how did the dating app work for you guys?
Well, the first date I went on, I took her out to this girl out to lunch. And actually, no, it was dinner, and I was like,
we're
okay.
talking about Francis now.
No, we're not talking about Francis. We're talking about someone else.
So this is a story not about Francis.
Yeah, the first match date.
You took her to Olive Garden.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know where you took her.
Well, it was a place in the city, and when I walked into the lobby of the restaurant, and I didn't see anyone that I thought was this girl, and there was a bigger girl, a tall girl, that was standing in the corner. I didn't think that this was the girl, which is fine. And then I called the date, and then I hear this girl's phone ring, and then my back is facing towards her. And then when she picks up the phone and said she was here, I was frightened. And then she came up behind me and hit me on the back, and I felt like it was like a linebacker. And at this point, I said, I'm probably I might have a few drinks during this date. But she was very nice. I was very polite. It just wasn't what I expected from her profile.
Yeah.
So then I decided to do coffee dates from that point forward, which meant just nice we'll grab coffee. We're not going to go out to dinner. Let me actually get to see you and know you before we decide.
That's a good idea in general, right?
It worked out a lot better.
Yeah.
And then I actually had gotten off a match for a while and then got back on and then sent a message to Francis. And my message was incredibly, impactful. It said like, "Hi, I like your profile. Write me back if you're interested."
It was pretty simple. I joined.
2 lines.
So Francis, Tony's 7 years older than you. How did did that fit the profile of men you were looking for?
Well,
I did not lie about my profile.
The only reason why I joined Match was not to actually find someone to date. I know that sounds strange, but when I moved to
You're
Manhattan,
just looking for a.
No, wasn't saying that either.
There were no hand signals there,
really
by the way, if
picking
you're
on me
listening.
here. I'm noticing there's 2 against 1. I need Sissy here to back me up. No, but my roommate at the time had made some friends outside of the entertainment world, which the entertainment world can be really great, but I mean probably like any industry, if all you're hanging out with is just people in your industry, sometimes it can get a little
Fairly insular.
Yeah, a little suffocating. So I was looking for people to, I don't know, just talk about other things with, other than auditions and shows and who was dating who and whatever. So my roommate had joined Match, and she didn't find anyone to really date, but she had made friends. And I found that really interesting because it seemed sort of difficult at the time for me because I was so new in Manhattan to make friends outside. And so that's the whole reason why I joined it. It's because I just thought I'd find somebody with common interest outside of the entertainment industry.
Right.
And so Tony wrote me, and his profile said that he likes surfing and Dave Matthews Band. And I said, sure, that could be a friend.
That could
and
be a friend.
obviously it turned into more than that. So.
Yep.
Yeah. You guys have a child in common now, as well as marriage. So yeah,
It worked
turned into a little bit more.
We're gonna stay friends.
Shared property.
Yeah.
And you're in business together too. You're not just a couple. You're in business together. Tony, you had a business.
Yeah.
We had worked together for a while. I worked with you before you met Francis.
Yep.
I mean, I can't take all the credit for it, but I did. Once you guys met, I did help really cement the relationship one night when I came to visit.
Oh.
I brought them a housewarming gift, which was a bottle of tequila, and Frances drank the whole thing by herself.
Okay, again, not true. Can we get a fact checker?
Just partially true.
Does this podcast come with fact checkers?
If I get more than 5,000 facts wrong, I get to be president. So that's how it works.
I mean, there's a lot of false information happening here, so I'm gonna have to get Sarah to back me up later.
No, this is good. So you guys meet, and Tony, you had a business. We had been working together with Excess, and we had a lot of fun events out in Long Island. In fact, you had come to me not long after we had kind of launched in the channel where you guys work, and you were bugging me. You were like a platinum level in your business, and you were saying, Dave, we got to go surf, right? And is that effectively what you're saying? Mm-hmm. Does that sound right?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, Francis here has a hard time with the facts, but you're agreeing with me.
No, I'm very on point with my facts. That's 100% accurate. And by the way, everything you've said is accurate tonight. Just,
No.
Just to be clear,
So when you went, I think your business had grown. You had hit some milestones that we look at, and I'm pretty excited about. And we were making a movie. This was about 2008. We're making a movie called Lost Profits.
Yep.
Filming in the Indonesia. We were going on a boat trip in Mentawais, however you say it, off the coast of West Sumatra. And I invited you along on that.
Yeah. That was a great trip.
That was kind of the first trip we did together.
Yeah, it was the first trip we did together. Before that trip, I thought I wanted to do like tow-in surfing and surf like 60, 70-foot waves. And then after that trip, I realized I was never going to do that.
We surfed, we paddled in, no tow-ins. We paddled into waves that had maybe 15-plus foot faces.
Oh, yeah, 20, 25. In my mind, it seemed like
quite a bit larger.
50-foot faces.
There were some big ones out there.
Yeah.
And they were breaking on very shallow reefs. And
yes, we had the cuts to prove it.
Yeah, and there were some very good pros who got us into places that we had no business being, but we went anyways. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was really an awesome trip.
Wait, you guys are saying those photos weren't photoshopped?
No, they weren't photoshopped.
We'll run
They
that
Heavily
by
edited,
Tom.
however.
Yeah.
We only show the good ones. There's a lot of bad ones. I remember looking at the photos with Tom Survey, who's a famous surf
Oh my
photographer.
gosh.
He was shooting the stills, and we go, oh man, that's so terrible. Oh, and he said to me, he goes, David, everybody has bad photos. We only publish the good ones. And I was like, I had fewer than the pros, but I still had some good ones. And Tony did as well. It was really fun. Great trip.
Yeah.
So Tony, you continue to build business, and you guys meet on Match.com.
Yeah.
How did you go from Match.com to a relationship, that was more than just friends with benefits, friends, whatever, and then basically being in a dedicated relationship, getting married, and then working in a business together, and Francis, you joining a business that was really cranking by the time you got involved. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I told you that I was a dancer before, but I was looking, my path was shifting in a pretty dramatic way. I just lost my dad a couple of years before moving to New York, so I was searching for something else that I felt would provide my life with more significance and purpose than what I was doing at the time. I also wanted to find something that was probably going to be a little more lucrative than relying on dance for the rest of my life.
It's a great thing to do when you're in your 20s, but it's probably not going to last forever, right?
Yeah, and I had no plan B at that time. So I was earnestly searching. I had no idea what I was going to do because that was my degree. That was my main skill set. That's what I'd worked on, day in and day out since, I was really 10 years old. So I didn't know what my other options were going to look like, but I was searching. So I was networking a lot in the city in Manhattan already, and I was honestly praying for something to come into my life that was going to be clear enough, a door, a pathway for me to walk through. So when I met Tony, I was surprised in many ways. I wasn't like looking for someone like I said at the time. So he shocked.
Baby arm, yeah.
Oh man, he shocked me with his good looks, and he shocked me with just the way he spoke and the things that he was concerned about at his age, which to me was unique. And we just were speaking the same language. We were on the same page with the kind of vision we wanted to create, the lives we want to create, essentially customize our lives, which we talk about all the time. And I just didn't have a pathway for it, but he did. And so when he showed me what he was doing and who he was connected with and the types of mentors and leaders that he had in his life that were taking him down the road that he was going down, it was kind of a no-brainer.
Right. So you met a guy who was a little older, but you guys weren't that old then. How long ago did you meet? How many years ago was it?
Over 8 now.
8 yeah, because...
Yeah, 2010-ish.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of right after the Lost Profits trip, more or less.
Yeah.
It's around that time.
Yeah, about a year after, I would say.
Yeah.
So you met, and he had, he was a nice guy who had purpose, who had a plan B, who, I'm not trying to put it in purely physical terms, but there was a connection, and there was a direction, and there was purpose, and those were some of the things that were important to you and you're looking for. Yeah,
and a big thing for me, a big shift in my perspective at that time when my father passed away. I mean, I had sort of like this existential crisis at that time, and I remember several things, but I remember at his visitation and funeral, it wasn't about reading off his resume and all the amazing, credentials he had stacked up. It was about...
And your father was in the military?
He was he was civilian, so he was the Director of Systems and Cost Analysis for AMCOM, which is Aviation and Missile Command for the Army.
Okay.
So he had a pretty important position, a lot more important than I realized. I realized it more after he had passed. He had contributed to several textbooks that are still used in universities today for supply chain management and stuff like that. But to us, he was just dad, because that was the kind of guy he was. So he would leave work at work, and he would come home, and then he would do plays with us, and he would make us our breakfast, and he was just a regular dad.
He wasn't defined by what he did at work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, after he passed away, we found a trunk of medals and trophies and certificates that he had received that he never shared with us, because he just wasn't, I don't know, he was more interested in our certificates and medals and trophies than his own.
Sure.
So at his funeral, and rightly so, the people that flew in from all across the country wanted to share about moments that he had invested into them.
Yeah.
Time he spent with them when he went above and beyond, where he drove to the hospital before, got there before their family did, or, just took an extra time out of his day to spend with someone, how much that meant to people and how much that impacted them. And
when they were stuck and needed to break through effectively,
exactly.
he took the time to be somebody to help them break through.
Absolutely. He cared beyond professional relationships. I mean, he truly cared about people, and it showed. In fact, another thing I found was he had a homemade bookmark. My dad always made homemade bookmarks, which I found really cheesy until after he passed, of course. And one of the ones that he actually printed it like 100 times in case, I guess, he lost the one. But on the bookmark, it said, "People are your most appreciable asset."
Oh, that's awesome.
And then it had a few points on, investing into people. And I thought it was, pretty incredible. And so two things. I noticed, yes, that people weren't paying attention to his credentials at the end of his life. It didn't matter. None of those awards and medals and trophies mattered.
Right.
What mattered were the moments and the time spent and the ways he invested, the way he influenced them, not the way he impressed them. That's what it was all about. And up until that point in my life, I was so focused on impressing.
Right.
And I was so focused on collecting the trophies and the medals and all of that. And that just really struck a chord with me that, hey, oh my gosh, what if this was me in this moment? Of course, I had a lot of great people that loved me and cared about me, but how was I investing back into people at that time in my life?
Sure.
And I made a decision then that I wanted to switch, the way that energy was flowing in my life and make sure it was flowing back out to people rather than just kind of being all about me.
You talked about existential crisis, and there's a really interesting existential philosopher, Gabriel Marcel, who talks about, one of the great things we can do in our existence is to be available to the other. And I think that's, if I'm hearing you correctly, I think that's a lot of what you're talking about, where what people remember and recall and repeat isn't the great outcomes that happen necessarily, but it's the times when they were in crisis or had a deep need. And your father, in this case, made himself available to them. Yep. Whether it was just to be a friend, whether it was to comfort, whether it was to assist. There's a million ways you can be available. And I think when you're really listening to somebody and you have empathy for them because you're trying to understand where they're coming from, then you get to this place where you open up. You're like, how can I help you right now? This isn't about me. This is about success. This isn't about an award we're going to win. This is about how do I help you get to this next, whatever the thing is you're trying to accomplish. For a variety of reasons, for a variety of purposes. But I think that connection, when people see that happening authentically, that's deeply moving, and it's I think that's kind of why people are here.
Absolutely. I mean, my dad really showed me a clear, visible picture of how you're made rich in your relationships. There were people that flew in from all across the country that we had never met. Pikes Peak, Boston, Washington, D.C., wherever he traveled. Yeah. And they flew in because they wanted to meet us, and they wanted to tell us about those moments where he showed up in their life and made a difference. Right. That we were completely unaware of,
That's
and
fantastic.
So that was major for me. And then he also had a bookshelf that he kept in his garage. Our garage, and I call it his garage.
Did he have a separate garage from your garage?
Well, I call it his garage because it was like his office.
the man room.
we didn't have space for him to have like a real office in the house, so it was the garage. And he would read books all the time off that shelf, and they were, it was all anything to. It wasn't, he wasn't reading fiction. It was all anything he could to challenge his mind or improve as a person, and that was always really important to him. And he always made sure that we had those books too, or if we went on road trips, he would play books on tape and stuff like that. Again, of course, I thought it was really cheesy until after he passed. And I wanted to, at one point, after he passed and I was grieving and I was in the home, it was just me and my mom, I wanted to feel close to him, which I think most people do when they lose a loved one. And I didn't know what to turn to or, really, and then all of a sudden it clicked, like, go to his bookshelf. I mean, that's where he spent most of his time, was reading. He didn't watch TV. He didn't play golf. He read. Go to his bookshelf. And I went to his bookshelf, and the first book I read was Man's Search for Meaning, but it had
Viktor Frankl.
Amazing. And it really helped me through that grief process. But
this is a Holocaust survivor, Viktor Frankl, who's writing about how do you find meaning in such, again, this is another massive, the Holocaust is one of the classic existential crises. When the most evil thing on earth can happen and suffering is ultimately almost as bad as it can get. Why does anything matter, right?
Yep, it comes down to hope.
Right.
Right, and so that was the first book I pulled off the shelf, and every book had my father's handwriting. Well, most of them had his handwriting in the margins. And so I've started just reading the handwriting in the margins because I was just searching, certainly, I just want to feel closer to him. I'm searching for a message almost.
So he's an interactive reader.
Yeah, but I couldn't understand his marginal writing without reading the book. So then I had to read the books in order to understand the context of what his notes were about. And it really transforms my brain. It transformed, the way I thought from that point forward. So needless to say, all of this was where this was kind of the storm that I was living in at the time, when I moved to New York. And, I kind of just stayed the course with what I was doing because I was just what I knew to do. But I was putting feelers out there and I was networking, trying to figure out, okay, what was this next big thing going to be? Because I knew it wasn't going to be dance. I knew I was closing the chapter on that.
Yeah. So
I was
you put
just
a feeler on Tony.
That's one way of saying it.
Well, you said it. I'm just putting the words back in your mouth.
But yeah, it just when we met and we had some pretty intense conversations right away. Our first few phone conversations were like 6 hours because I wasn't.
Tony speaks slowly.
Well, my roommate knew that something was wrong or up because I was not a phone talker. I didn't stay on the phone for very long. So yeah, I and he introduced me to what he did and the work that we do now and the work that Tony was doing at the time, it's people based. It's all about investing into people and helping people move their lives forward, whether it's financially, relationally, just in their personal walk in general. That's what it's all about. So it made perfect sense.
And Tony, tell me about that. What do you do? And you're it's not just Francis. You work with your parents, your sister, brother-in-law. Tell me what you do and how you got involved in your business.
Yep.
And kind of explain it and help us understand what this business is that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. When I grew up, my parents had lost a lot of money. I saw a lot of just terrible financial, challenges that they had gone through.
That was through a furniture business that they inherited from your grandparents, right?
Yeah, my dad had inherited from his parents, and some bad things happened with the family, and parents lost a lot of money, went into a lot of debt. Certain things that went down that really shouldn't have happened. So I saw this financial roller coaster growing up, and as a kid I just didn't want to be in that situation. And then turns out time had gone by. I was 22, had a lot of debt. I was going to be a dad, really moving towards being a single dad. Got married young, divorced young. And I just needed help. I needed some guidance, and I went to my dad. And
how old were you when you got married the first time?
21.
Okay.
Yeah, so got married, had a kid, got divorced shortly thereafter. Boom, 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 built up a lot of debt.
How old were you when you got divorced?
I was 26.
Okay.
Yeah, 26,
so
27.
You got married, had Vincent, your son.
Yep.
Lovely young man.
Yep.
And the marriage didn't work, didn't stick, and so then here you are 26 and got some big challenges.
Yeah, and at 22 years old, I knew I was already having challenges, and I went to my dad and said, hey, look, I need help. Obviously, maybe I don't know as much as I think I know, because obviously the results that I was producing in my life certainly weren't producing any fruit, that's for sure. So he connected me with some people. He opened up some doors, and there was one individual, his name was Charlie, that really had just created amazing results. He retired young, spent all the time in the world with his kids, loved his wife, had a great relationship. He was financially independent, and I basically started to stalk this guy, asked this guy to teach me, to help me, to coach me, and he was working with my dad, so there was a really good trust between me and this guy Charlie, my dad, and Charlie. So I basically they started to teach me how to budget. They started to teach me what it looked like to actually be in business for myself. But the thing that they really focused on was they said, Tony, look, if we teach you how to make all this money, but your life is a total mess, you're going to screw it up again. Right. So they really started to coach me first in life. And then the second part was business, finances, everything else like that. And, to make a long story short, after, I had become successful, and then when Frances and I got together, my business was doing well. We were doing good. But she brought a whole nother dynamic, to our business, to helping people, to coaching people, just basic things that I think a lot of guys just miss. Or anytime you're in the middle of something and you have an outside perspective, a clear-minded outside perspective, I mean, it could totally change, what you're doing and how you're doing things, because you just don't see it when you're in the middle of it. And Frances was such a good partner, but she handled that transition with just so much grace, because a lot of people were like, oh, well, you're getting together with a successful guy, or whatever. And she really she was just super humble about it, and really did the work that she needed to do to kind of get caught up to speed.
So it wasn't a free ride. Frances jumped in with both oars in the water, and I've seen it happen. I mean, yeah. I almost wonder what you do now, because Frances seems to do most of the work.
And I would agree with that.
Well, you both have oars in the water, and you're rowing together. Yeah. It's great.
We have a lot of fun together, and I think that just didn't matter to me as far as what any of the tangibles. It was more about like, hey, this is an opportunity for us to really make a difference together. And, I really could see the future down the road with the both of us. And, it's been incredible for our marriage. Like, the fact that we work together, it's brought a really cool dynamic to our marriage in general, because we had to learn right away, almost immediately, how to be business partners, and then how to build a relationship, and then a marriage.
Right. And that's not easy.
No.
In fact, that's maybe hard. I mean, a lot of people have two different careers and a shared life at home when they're not working. Yeah. And in a way, that can be easier because you don't have to be together all the time. Mm-hmm. You can escape. Yeah. You can escape the relationship with the other life you have, effectively. Yeah. Have you had any challenges with working together where, has that created tension or difficulty?
It wasn't the work part. It was just the relationship part. And I just didn't know how to be in a relationship, to be honest with you. I had a lot of baggage from my previous relationship. And even before that, I just didn't know how to be in good, healthy relationships. I grew up, I got into a lot of fights. I was a hockey kid. I didn't really see my parents model a good relationship until I was, in my late teenage years, and after they had gone through kind of a whole process of change. So I'm certainly not blaming them.
No, I get it. But when most of your learning and developmental years are before you're 18, so it's great when people can transform. And your parents are wonderful people. I've met them, and I know that they've changed a lot. But it's funny, you see, whenever you hear about, like, in a big company, you'll see people sabotage projects or sabotage things. Yeah. And you're like, why is this person doing that? You think it's intentional. Yeah. And in fact, like, Harvard Business Review had a really good article on this, and they said, the funny thing is most of these people don't even know they're doing it. Yeah. They're basically just acting out what they've seen in their home. Yep. Dysfunctional behavior that they learned. Yep. And it's really, really hard, one, to identify it in yourself, and two, actively change it, right? Those are very, very difficult things to do. Most people don't, they fail.
Right.
They keep changing jobs, or they keep changing spouses, or they keep, it's just whatever. You see people who go through just we're all damaged in a way, but, hopefully, we realize it's not the world's fault.
Yeah.
Maybe I've got a problem I need to fix. Right.
Yeah, that was the whole thing is when I started to have some people in my life, when Frances and I were having issues, and, to be totally honest and transparent, she had left me for a period of time. And I remember actually talking to my dad and talking to some other mentors that I had in my life that I was, fortunate enough to have in my life. And they said, Tony, like, she ain't the problem here. You have to change this. And if you don't, you're going to be on divorce number 2 looking for divorce number 3.
Right.
And I think the thing that was the most impactful was having to say to my son, Vincent, who was, I guess at that time, he was, I don't know, probably 9, like, hey, buddy, sorry, Dad screwed up again, because he loved Frances. I mean, he loves Frances, so that was like,
I've
that
definitely
just
seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. That thought crushed me. And then obviously losing Frances in general would be crushing. And so I just made a decision, like, okay, like, I'm going to be really open and, just open to receive whatever, corrective, criticism / just change that I need to do. And really what it was, Dave, was like, I just wasn't self-aware. Like, until I started actually go through like some personality testing and have people really like list out like what I was doing. It was almost like I had a couple sessions with our counselor, and some sessions just rocked my world when I became self-aware as to what my behavior was actually doing in 2 relationships in my life.
Right.
I mean, it crushed me for months, where I was like, just so remorseful and just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've acted this way. Like, what an idiot, so. Yeah.
And to that point, I mean, I think one of the hard things, I've talked about Brene Brown quite a bit on here, and her work in vulnerability. I know you guys are familiar with that.
Yeah, we love her.
So when, the thing about vulnerability is you have to be in a place where you can basically feel, where you can be vulnerable, right? So what was it, Frances leaving, that allowed you to get to this place where you could be vulnerable?
Yeah. I think I was in my mind, I was saying things like, well, I've gotten so much better from my previous relationship. I've gotten so much better from the times, when I was a kid or when I was in my early 20s. Like, so I've improved, and yes, technically I did, but I still wasn't near being at that place where it was like, okay, no, now you're in a good place where you could have a healthy relationship. So I was putting all these Band-Aids and justifying why I hadn't really made that big leap to be vulnerable, and to really open up and really, really, put myself in a position to really change and grow. So when she left, I basically stopped trying to
make excuses.
Yep.
Frances, what did you see, or what did you experience?
No,
be candid. Though. Seriously, be candid. Yeah.
No, and by the way, we're very open about this. We found so many great things have come out of us sharing this with people that we invest into and we work with, and people that we don't even know actually that have heard our story as it's been shared throughout our network and beyond, and how it's motivated guys especially and women to open up and be more vulnerable. It's really been incredible to witness, and I'm so proud of my husband for going through that process, because it wasn't easy. I think for a lot of men especially, vulnerability is considered a weakness. And
I mean, basically it's our strength psychologically for anybody, but particularly I think men, to your point, the testosterone probably has something to do with it, is tied to our egos. Yeah. Is tied to the sense of self that, you develop as a healthy child. I'm separate from my mother.
Yeah.
And you have to go through that. But there's also a point where you have to realize, but there's a whole world that isn't just me. This, the world doesn't revolve around my navel.
Right.
Right. And that's self-awareness, I think. Right. I'm not a psychologist, but I think, that's right.
Yeah.
And And then there's a point, hopefully, where we become more fully formed humans, where we start to say, well, you know, maybe when people are reacting badly to me consistently, it's not them. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's not Satan. Maybe it's not them. Maybe it's not the world. You know, maybe it's not whatever you want to label some monster out there.
At some point, there's no one else.
There's
blame.
literally
I'm creating these problems.
Yeah.
Especially if they happen over and over and over again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, our relationship, just to take it back a few steps, our relationship was good 98% of the time. But that 2% of the time when we would get into conflict, which was also cyclical, so it happened about once a month, it turned into be pretty ugly. And I have a choleric melancholy temperament, so I'm pretty even.
What does that mean?
So cholerics are typically, you know, like leadership driven. They can just be kind of just they're typically stronger personalities. And then I have this melancholy side of me that's a little bit more, you know, detailed, but just a big thinker.
So you've got like a general and an accountant living inside you?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So, and they kind of cancel each other out sometimes. It can be really interesting. But I'm typically a little bit more even keel and thoughtful in my approach. Another reason for that is because when my dad passed, one of the books that I read was The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, and the chapter on being impeccable with your word really sat with me. And so I don't know, I just in conflict I've always choose my words carefully. And so therefore, if someone else didn't choose their words carefully, don't
stare at Tony when you say that. Joking.
It would hit me.
But I think that's true.
You know, it would pierce me a little bit deeper than maybe it would somebody else who's a little more reckless with their words. So that's what we experienced in conflict. And then Tony would be able to have a disagreement, kind of blow up, and then feel better about it because he got it all out, you know. But then for me, it would sit with me, and then I would store it up in my Rolodex, and
you internalized it.
Exactly, and
you took it seriously.
Very seriously.
You took the things that were said very seriously. Where maybe in Tony's world, people say things when everyone knows they're emotional and heated, and it doesn't mean what the words were said. Is that accurate, Tony?
Oh yeah, it's totally accurate. And obviously, when you become self-aware, you realize how ridiculous that is. You can't just run around saying stupid stuff and hurtful things to the people that you're the closest to, and not expect that to leave any residue.
Of course, yeah.
So for some reason, I mean, it all makes sense now. But in the beginning, because I had been in other relationships before, and I had been with some guys who had a similar tendency, and I just left. I didn't stay with, like, it was just clear, like, okay, there's a challenge here, I'm out. Like, I was very tunnel vision on where I needed to go, and I didn't want to. But with Tony, I was like, oh my gosh, like, okay, he's so great, but this 2% of the time, you know, he can turn into the Incredible Hulk. So, all right, what do we do with this? And I just hung on, and I just was real prayerful about it the whole time. And then, but if it just finally got to a point where I couldn't stay any longer, and I just said, okay, I can't. I've done all I can. I've tried to tried to have conversations with him, even outside of these moments, and we had even gone to a counselor a little bit before then, and he was just he just wasn't ready. He wasn't ready to be vulnerable or be in that place where I saw that he was willing to do significant work and change to really become the husband that, you know, I needed, or I wanted to be with, desire to be with. Didn't mean I didn't love him. I loved him tremendously, and it broke my heart, but I knew I had to make that decision to leave, because I knew I couldn't have a kid and have a daughter and say, hey, it's okay for mommy, you know, to have these heated discussions with daddy, and for him to say these things.
So to tolerate that.
Exactly.
Effectively, right?
Exactly.
So go ahead.
No. So it was a dignity thing, and it was just, I couldn't allow myself to stay in that situation.
Do you think, and this is kind of a question connected to this, and I think it's helpful to listeners who may be working through a lot, because we get a lot of questions from people about working through different issues, whether it's somebody saying, hey, I want to write, but, I'm just not doing it, or I want to have this business, but I'm not putting in, I haven't figured out how to break through and do the consistent work that I need to do, et cetera. How much of success, and I don't mean just material success, but I mean living a great life where you're happy, well-formed, doesn't mean everything's good all the time, but you're working through problems functionally, you have good boundaries on what's, reasonable behavior and what's not, et cetera. How much of that is interior work versus exterior work?
Oh, gosh. I think...
Because you guys work with a lot of people who are also trying to change and break through barriers and actually create better lives, not just make more money. So they actually want to create lives where they're happy, right? Where they have functional behavior. And because otherwise you amplify, you can make more money, but you just amplify bad behavior, and that doesn't help anybody either, right?
Yeah, it just highlights your character. If you make a ton of money and you have bad character, obviously it's going to just be highlighted. But for people that want to become quote unquote successful in a relationship, financially, whatever, if they don't have a big enough need and or desire, they're just not going to do it. It's
change. It's like you, and until Francis said, hey, either either change or I can't come back because I can't
be with you.
That doesn't work, right?
Yeah. So I would say pretty much 99.9% is internal.
Most of it,
yeah. A lot of people are like, well, how do you get motivated? I'm like, well, I just knew what I didn't want. I didn't want to be in a crappy relationship. I didn't want to have to explain to my son why things weren't the way that they were. From a financial standpoint, I didn't want to be broke. I didn't want to be struggling for money because when you think of 90% of the decisions that we make on a daily basis are based around money and our relationships. So those are two big topics that people typically suck at their entire life. So I was just super simple in my
because
thinking.
Both take tremendous discipline in order to actually not just have typical results. It's easy to have crappy relationships. Yep. It's easy to just take from a relationship or to just react or to not have boundaries or all this. Because in order to have boundaries, you actually have to be deliberate about boundaries. Yep. And then you have to enforce them. And once you do that, and you do that as a habit, it becomes fairly easy and it creates much more functional lives together. But if you don't do that, it's really easy just to be dysfunctional and to repeat dysfunction you've seen practiced by other people who didn't have that discipline in your life, right?
Well, yeah.
Is that right or not? You don't have to agree with me.
No, that's 100% right. And that was the whole thing is we just, I just looked at people and we said, okay, we are going to stop. I was going to stop listening to people who didn't have the results that I wanted in life in those two areas. And it was literally that simple. I stopped looking at people with bad relationships and getting advice from them. I stopped looking at people with terrible finances and stopped getting advice from them. And I started to look at people that were prospering in those two areas. And what I realized was, which is really, really scary, was everything I was doing in my life was the opposite of what successful people were doing.
Which is very common.
Yeah. But a lot of people aren't honest about it. And because they're not honest about it, they go, oh, well, I'm kind of doing that.
Or they'll give you all the, my favorite is, I shouldn't say this. This sounds condescending, but you'll meet people who give you all the reasons why, and I've managed a lot of people. I've worked with a lot of people, and I love them. And one of the first things I try and teach people or work with people on is, do the reasons matter?
Yeah.
You're going to tell me all the reasons why? Does that solve anything? Does that help us move forward? Does it help us progress? Because if it doesn't, the reasons why don't matter. We don't need to waste our time on that anymore. We don't need to keep talking about them. Right. What we need to focus on is, how do we solve this? How do we get to where we want to go? What's the end that we're looking for, and how do we get there from here? Because it's the great thing about having being a CEO or having been a CEO is you have no excuses. The board doesn't care. Yep. The only thing that matters is, did you get this done or not? Did you do it correctly? Did we do this? Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you didn't, the reason I always like to say, look, let's talk about the result first. Here was the goal. Tell me where we end up. I don't care why right now. I just want to know what the result is. After you tell me the end result, do we still really need to talk about why? Yeah. Because all the reasons why. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, we always say success doesn't have sympathy for your excuses.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it's everybody has something going on, right? Everybody has some sort of
there's a million reasons to fail.
You know, we could all point and create our lists and blame and point the finger at other people, but at the end of the day, none of that matters, you know, and it all comes back to you,
right?
And whether or not you delivered on whatever it was that you were supposed to be doing that day. Did you invest your time into the things that actually mattered, you know, and moved your life forward, or did you sit and wallow in your excuse?
Which ties right back into vulnerability. I mean, basically blame is the counterpart to vulnerability. Blame is an excuse.
Right.
Yeah.
Blame is why I didn't do it. Blame is why, you know, I can't, it's because of them. Rather than, you know, I need to. Right. And I need to figure out how. And I still need to stop blaming everybody else and just figure out interior, you know, it's an interior. I think when you recognize the value of vulnerability when you start to say, you know, the interior game is really what matters.
Yeah.
The exterior pieces of this will fall into place when I fix what's wrong inside here.
Yep.
You'll never fix the sickness by attacking the symptoms. You have to get to the heart of it, right?
Yep. 100%. I mean, you know, there's a great book I'm reading right now called The Enemies of the Heart by Andy Stanley, and it talks about the 4 reasons: jealousy, greed, anger, and guilt. You know, the 4 reasons why most people don't, you know, move ahead in their life. And just to circle it back to Tony and that whole journey, I was so proud of him for going through that, for finding vulnerability and finding strength in vulnerability. And I think one of the other reasons why he was, you know, of course I had pushed him to that point, and then he also trusted the counselors that, you know, he was going to fall into receiving that counseling advice from. And some of those sessions were really brutal and really, really ugly in terms of him really needing to hear what was going on and to create that awareness for him. But he kept showing up. I remember him telling me like, do we have to go see him again? Or he was just dreading it every time we would have an appointment. But he kept showing up, and then finally got to a place where he saw it as strength and he really embraced it. And then the results that and the fruit that has created in our lives, within our relationships and the people that we lead, I mean, it's hard to count. It's been unbelievably incredible just to watch. So it all happened for a reason, and that's the other point of things. Mm-hmm. People look at their struggle as, you know, as the reason why they should fail. Well, no, that's the very reason why you should succeed.
Right.
You know, and every time we see a challenge, we look at it as, okay, well, we're coming up against a challenge because we're doing something great.
Right.
You know, and so we've used our struggle in a really healing and helpful way and healthy way to help a lot of other people. We needed to go through that to be able to serve other people the way that we do. And that's what most people don't realize.
Isn't it funny how, like, when you think about it, like, you think, okay, you lead a lot of people. I mean, how many people, just put in perspective, how many people do you, in your organization, you know, of clients, I mean, all the different, I don't know how to explain it very well, but how many people do you work with?
Yeah, I mean, we're effectively coaching, you know, upwards of 2,000, you know, plus people that we're connected to, but then we're connected to some other organizations that are tens of thousands. So we're speaking, you know, in front of tens of thousands of people every single year.
And working directly one-on-one with a lot of the leaders.
Yep.
I mean, this is like hands-on business, not just talking on a stage like motivational speakers.
Yeah, no. Very, very, I mean, we really, really do life with people.
And then, so what I'm trying to get to is I think, you know, the thing that's kind of antithetical, that's different than what you might think, is a lot of people would say, well, I've got to be the strong personality to be a great leader, right? You know, I'm going to show them, you know, I'm going to put myself on a pedestal. I'm going to have higher values. I'm going to do all these things better. And that's going to make me a great leader. When in fact, it seems like, if I'm hearing you correctly, and I agree with this, you know, we all fail. We all fall short of whatever goals we have, whatever values we have. You know, we screw up. And I think it's, to what you've been telling me, it's that vulnerability to say, I made a humongous mistake and I'm really sorry. And here's how we work through it. and here's how you can work through it when you have mistakes. And by the way, you can admit them here too. This is a safe place for people who fail, because guess what? We all do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing the people that I connected to the most. And I mean, gosh, you could go back to the Bible, anything. Nobody ever got excited. Any of the stories in the Bible, it's about a struggle, a victory, or a victory, struggle, victory. It's always that same kind of pattern.
There's a cyclical pattern, right?
Yeah.
The Bible's the foundation of all Western literature, basically.
Yeah.
It's for the West. It's the great meta narrative. It's the great story that underlies all the great stories.
Yep.
It's whether you're watching Thor or whether you're watching you're reading Jane Eyre, it's the same story. And this is Joseph Campbell, by the way. This isn't David Vanderveen. If you go to Reed College, which is an agnostic school, they'll say the same thing. Like, that's why they read the Bible at Reed College. It's not because they're Christians. It's because if you want to understand literature and you want to understand humanities, you got to understand the great narratives that drive humanity. So you're obviously talking about the Bible. Are you, if you don't mind me just backing up a little bit, how do you guys identify religiously? Are you Christian, Buddhist, Muslim?
We're non-denominational Christian.
Yeah. But it's funny, back to that point, when you look at people in terms of, talking about vulnerability and whatnot.
Yeah.
I related to people that went through the biggest struggle.
Sure.
And I think as human beings we do. And then it's funny, though, a lot of people have this idea that you have to be perfect.
Right.
And in fact, anytime I've seen somebody put on stage or whatever that's quote unquote perfect, I'm like, well, I can't do what he does.
Right.
Or I can't be that good. Or I'm not that good or whatever, because I just don't hear about the things that they went through.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not that they are perfect. Of course they're not perfect. But that was the thing with us, is when we started to see other people that went through great struggle, and came out successful, and not only came out successful on the other side, but what they learned through that process, and the fact that they actually needed that struggle to become better than they were. That's what really, I guess, and that's
called the hero's journey.
Yeah, that's what moved me so much. So like when I was in the middle of all this shit, it was like, okay, well, all right, I know there's a purpose with this. What am I supposed to learn through this? How do I actually, improve not only my life, but the lives of others because of the mistakes, the mistakes that I'm making. I want to make sure I do everything I can so that I teach other people not to make these same mistakes. And I think when people understand that, it becomes incredibly powerful.
You're learning from the failure. It's not just failure for its own sake, but you're learning from it, and that failure is helping you become better, right? So, like Joseph Campbell, he's did a whole series of TV specials. He wrote some amazing books, but he talks about the hero's journey, which is part of the meta narrative that, and again, it could be Jesus, could be superheroes. I mean, this is the same story. It's somebody who's going down the path of a normal, everyday existence. They get wildly thrown off course and crash to earth or whatever it is, and find themselves in circumstances that they never would have chosen. But if it weren't for those circumstances and it didn't unmask all of their frailties, they wouldn't have been able to become this totally transformed person. Yep. And it's that transformation process that allows them to become something they never thought they would ever become. And they wouldn't have if they had stayed on that safe track doing whatever it was. And you see it in people. I mean, it's the people that take the big risks and fail.
Yeah.
And then figure out why they failed and ultimately succeed that are that are like the superheroes, the Steve Jobs, the Bill Gates, etc. I mean, you pick your favorite flavor. Jeff Bezos, I mean, there's a million of them, but not a million, but there's, they're the unicorns in a way. Yeah. But I also think, I talk about Mark Zuckerberg, and I say, my concern with Mark Zuckerberg is he's kind of had like he hit it out of the ballpark in college.
Yeah.
Right. And I know I watched his documentaries. I know he's had struggles along the way. It has not been easy to create Facebook.
Yeah.
But it's also been like one huge success. And I said to somebody, I said, I almost feel bad for him because he hasn't had the opportunity to have big colossal failures, which are ultimately what unmask us and strip away all the things, the crutches and the veneers that we lean on, so that we can get to that vulnerable piece. And I'm sure, by the way, I don't know anything about Mark Zuckerberg personally, so he probably has gone through that, and I'm sure he's learned a lot, and he's a fully formed human. I'm not saying that about him personally. I'm just saying, if you go through life without if it's just success to success, I mean, one, it would be the most boring story on earth.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody wants to hear that story.
Right. You want to see somebody go through that struggle to get to that pinnacle that ultimately brings you to this place where you become this thing that nobody would have ever imagined.
Yeah.
And that's what moves people. And that's why that story, for whatever reason, is what moves human beings. That's why it's called the meta-narrative.
Well, it was funny. We just had an interview with Peter Mallouk, who is the president and of Creative Planning, and it's a huge wealth management firm, and they have, right now I believe $33 billion under asset management. And we had a great interview with him a couple days ago, and it was so funny because he had gone through a bunch of super entrepreneurial from the time he was a young man. Started up businesses, and he had this really, really great CD store. And he opened up like 2 or 3 stores and 4 stores and 5 stores, and he bought out all of his partners, and he hadn't made any money because he kept reinvesting. And literally the 2 months after he bought out his last partner, and I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what he said. He had gotten 2 months of paychecks. All right, he bought out his last partner, and Napster came out. And it totally crushed him. But his attitude was so good, and he was so thankful.
What was his attitude?
He just said, he goes, what? He goes, it's not the fact that I wasn't cutting edge in the CD world. He goes, I wasn't cutting edge enough in the music world to see what was coming next.
Right. You're so focused on CD stores, he missed what the cataclysmic changes happening in the industry.
Exactly. And that's what he said. And he goes, so I've applied everything I learned, or every mistake I made in that business, I've applied it to what he does now with wealth management and whatnot. And
so out of the resources you work with on people, so you help people get their finances pulled together.
Yeah.
And part of that is start saving money.
Yeah.
And by the way, start putting that nest egg someplace where it's going to be productive for you.
Yep.
Right. You help people. I mean, you do a lot of different things. And Peter Mallouk is one of the people. He's one of the on the finance side of the resources you provide when you're doing your mentorship and coaching.
Yep.
He's one of the people that helps people get their financial lives in order, so that hopefully whatever they're doing, like working with you and making having fresh income and building a business, and that they can start saving some of that too, not just blowing it on Cadillacs and
just cars that they don't need.
Yeah.
Or whatever else.
I'm sure Cadillac's very nice. I'm not down on Cadillacs, but I'm just saying, like, not blowing it on things they don't need is effectively what I'm saying.
Yeah, our goal is to teach people to be responsible stewards of their money, and Peter's been a phenomenal resource for that. And I was just going to add, one of the things he said to us is, he said, look, the reason why I've become so successful is because I've just gotten really good at failing. Yeah. I fail and fail and fail. But he said, but I never really got bummed about it.
Yeah.
He said, I've failed so many times. He said, even when I lost a CD store, when that whole thing blew up, he was just like, all right, well, what's next? I was just so energy driven to go on to the next thing. And he said, and think about it, if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be where I'm at with creative planning. And, he's got somewhere under... How many? $32 billion in under wealth management right now, and he could have just had a few CD stores.
I would guess $32 billion in wealth management, under management, is better than some selling CDs.
Well, that was the thing. He said we would never be where we're at if I had just kept, if those businesses had quote unquote succeeded. He goes, I'd never be here.
It was the failure and the learnings from the failure that allowed him to make a quantum leap to the next level.
Yep.
So we should, and this is, it's funny. I mean, there's a great documentary on a comedian who was super famous. His name literally just jumped out of my head, but he talked about, he was doing a show, the Larry Sanders Show, and his name is, how did this jump out of my head? Super famous comedian who I follow, love. Anyways, and what he created the Larry Sanders Show. But anyway, he was just saying they were having all this trouble on the show and on the set, and he said, look at all the things we're learning right now. How lucky are we? And all the people were freaking out and having all these problems. And, basically, it all kind of came together. But his point was, when things are falling apart, when you're in the middle of it, breathe, right? Mm-hmm. You're meditating now, correct?
Yeah.
And how are you using meditation?
Yeah, so we probably implemented that into our daily practice a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
And it's changed it's changed so much about how we go about our day. We personally use the Muse Headbands, and
Muse Headbands are they're like timers, and how does Muse? I don't know how they
work. Really cool.
It tracks your brain waves.
Okay.
So you wear it on the front of your, it goes around the front of your head and back of your ears, and it'll actually track your brain waves. You'll put in some headphones. You'll listen to the sound of the ocean, and then if you get off track, you hear birds. And so then at the end of the meditation, it'll tell you how many birds.
Well, the birds are good.
Oh, actually, sorry.
That's when you're,
Yeah, sorry, I'm flipping it. But if you get in a certain number of birds and you've had a good practice, if you don't get any birds, you have a terrible practice. And I was a little skeptical.
Shooting the birds with shotguns?
I was a little skeptical at first, but it really is accurate. And so we do that, and then we also like to do gratitude sessions.
That's great.
In the morning.
So it's a lot of mindfulness.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And that everything comes down to being intentional with your day.
How does a gratitude, I mean, obviously you're grateful for me. Mm-hmm. By the way, it was Gary Shandling. Somehow that jumped out of my head, but yeah.
Okay.
By the way, there's a phenomenal 2-part documentary that Judd Apatow did on Gary Shandling. That's incredible. Huge comedian who had this incredible career, but he was, practiced meditation, was very intentional about it, and was very deliberate about when you have failures, you in the middle of them try and get the learnings, not just wait till the end of it. Anyways, but so you're using how do your gratitude sessions? By the way, I'm very ADD, so if I jump around, you can always pull me back. Squirrel. But but when you do a gratitude session, how does that work?
Yeah, so we and you were in our gratitude session this morning, David.
Thank you, David's not here right now.
No. So what we do is we thank. We're Christians, like I mentioned before, so we thank God for things in our life, and every day it's different. So it might be just the sound of a bird that we hear during the session, but we'll just thank God for people and things and health and whatever it is that we're thankful for that morning. And then the second part of the session, we thank him for things that we're claiming victory over that haven't been done yet. So that what that does is it clears our head, it clears the mechanism, if you will, of worry and doubt for things that we don't have control over, that may not even happen, right? So
you're trying to eliminate fear, worry, and doubt effectively through the process.
Exactly. So to give a real basic example, when I was pregnant with my daughter a little over a year ago, I would just be thankful for a healthy delivery and a healthy baby, just in advance, and it would just bring so much more peace of mind and more of a calmness to the way I operated throughout my day. And if we don't do it, we feel a major difference. So yeah, the Muse has been great. One of our buddies.
It's easy to get wrapped up in those feelings if you're not aware of them.
Yeah.
And if you're not kind of intentional about addressing them and saying, wait a minute, why am I, like, where am I? Why am I here? And what caused that feeling? Like, I was reading Friedrich Buechner earlier, and he was talking about Adam, in the Genesis story of Adam and Eve in the garden, and they eat this fruit that they're not supposed to eat, and then God comes to them and says, "Excuse me, where are you?" Which is, basically, why are you in this position? You're hiding, and then God says, which makes them say, why are you here? What did you do to put yourself in this place? What's occurred, right? And the second question was, why are you here effectively? Like, where are you? Why are you here? And so they say, we're hiding. Okay, well, why are you hiding? What did you do in the past to get you in this position today? And I think to that point, like, it's kind of like when you're dealing with fear and doubt and worry, it's never about where you are right now, which is really the only time we have.
Right.
The past is gone and the future hasn't happened. And that's every moment.
Yeah.
Right? That's why being present is so important. But I think that fear, doubt, all those things are about the spaces that we're not in.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this, okay, the cool thing about meditation, I think one of the cool things, I think you're saying the same thing, I'm trying to relate to it, is I'm intentionally listening, so I'm trying to connect to it. But I think it's basically saying, okay, when you have this fear, when you have this anger, when you have this doubt, when you have this worry, just observe it. Why? It's fine to have it, but why are you having it?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And you know, and sometimes it serves a purpose. That was one of the
For
things.
sure.
One of the things that I had wrong for a portion of my life was that fear should not exist, but
Fear is quite healthy, actually.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And everything was like, you know, no fear, be fearless, right? All these campaigns that get put into your head, and
Things a lot of 18 to 20-year-olds say.
Yeah, and you know, and I shifted that perspective a while ago, but recently I read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert.
Oh yeah.
And she has a chapter called The Road Trip. And in that chapter she talks about fear, and she personifies her emotions. And as she personifies fear, she really describes its relationship in our life in a really cool way. And she says, look, you know, you need fear.
Right.
She's like that. I've met two types of people in the world who don't have fear: toddlers and sociopaths.
Right.
Everybody, or psychopaths. Everyone else has fear. Fear has told you, you know, don't walk down that alleyway. Fear has told you, step back from that cliff. You know, it's served a healthy purpose in your life. It just doesn't have discernment.
Right.
So sometimes it shows up when you're sitting down to literally write a poem.
Right.
You know, and you just have to talk to it and say, hey, you know, thanks for your services, you're not needed, and excuse it.
Right. So you address fear.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, so I think for a lot of people, though, I think that they need to eliminate fear in order to do great things.
To do the work
life,
they need to do.
right?
Yeah.
So that we get those questions all the time, like, how did you get over your fear of this? How did you get over your fear of that? And I just look at people and I say, you know what? I don't think I ever did. I still have a healthy amount of fear in my life. And you know what? It still shows up in those times.
Sure.
In those times that, you know, you're asking me, how did I get over my fear of connecting with people or talking on stage? And
big question.
Shows up a lot still.
Right.
It's just how I dictate to that feeling.
Sure.
That's made the difference.
Well, and I also think, like, it's to your point, right? It's understanding why you're having that fear.
Yeah.
And really digging into that.
Yeah.
We do, like in surfing, one of the things I did with the kids when they were little is we'd have, you know, it's big and you're afraid of these big waves and what happens if I go over the falls. One of the things you have to do is we do what we call take off and die contests. Like usually it's like, how good am I going to ride this wave? It doesn't matter how well you ride the wave. What matters is, did you go?
Yep.
Like, did you commit to that wave?
Yeah.
And so we just do a thing where it's like, I don't even care if you make the wave. What I care about is, did you go? And so the contest is who has the best take, who just throws themselves off that lip into the into the freaking pit below.
Yep.
And because the whole point is, you do that about 5 or 6 or 10 times, you start to realize nothing really bad's going to happen to me. It's all in my head.
Right.
And you also learn how to fall into all those other things. But I think it's the same thing with contacting, in our business, when you have to go meet people and build intentional relationships and see if there's even a relationship there.
Right.
That's scary at first.
Yeah.
And so, one of the best things you can do is just say, well, what's the worst thing that happens? Somebody's going to yell and scream and maybe run away.
Yep.
Let's say that's the worst thing that happens. Then what?
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Well, you have to choose which fear is going to be more important to you.
Right.
And what I mean by that is the fear of connecting with someone. Okay, if that's going to be so important to you that you're going to stay home and not do it, or you're going to walk away from the situation. Okay, well then, but what's the greater consequence of not doing that?
Right.
See, my fear when I get to the end of my life, my greatest fear is getting to that point and not having done the things
wish I had built that business. Wish I had tried these things. Yeah.
Exactly, because I fell victim to my own fears.
Right.
And I was too self-centered and too self-focused to push beyond that comfort zone and do things that actually, would serve the world and give back to humanity. So that's my greater fear.
Right.
So both exist in my life, but I have to choose which one I'm gonna, which one's gonna be the most important.
Being afraid of what people think about you, which is one, you start to realize they don't think about you, and then two, it doesn't matter anyway. So why are we really worried about this?
Right.
And we're just sifting through humanity, finding the people that want to work with us. That's easy.
Yep.
It's only hard when you make it hard, when you freak out about something that no one else cares about, right? I mean,
yeah. And to your point, the more you show up and prove to yourself that you can do it, that's how confidence is built. That's the second question we get all the time. First is,
do the work.
How do I eliminate fear? The second is, how do I build confidence? Just do it.
Do the work. It's so funny. We were talking about writing last week, I think, on this podcast. And one of the books I recommended is a really great book by Stephen Pressfield called The War of Art. And he's a great writer. He's written some fantastic books. But his book, The War of Art, is probably one of the greatest books on how to write. And it's something you'll see that comes up over and over and over again in great authors. And what they all say is, you got to do the work. You have to be very deliberate about actually writing every day for hours a day. Most people can write, I think most great writers can write maybe 2 to 4 hours a day and do, meaningful work. Otherwise, you start to get bogged down and you can't be creative for that long. But he's like, I treat it like a job. Like, I take a shower, I get up, I put my work boots on, I sit down at my desk, and then I go to war and I do the work, because your brain starts to give you all the reasons and excuses to do something else, then sit down and focus and do the work. I mean, thank God there's Concerta now, because, no, I'm kidding. But people with ADD. Yeah. Well, and even like I have ADD, and I've had struggle with my whole life. And the thing I've known about myself, the way I didn't have the benefit of, drugs that help you focus your brain, which is what those do, and they're really good at it. But one of the things I had to learn to do is I knew that I would fight sitting down and doing the work until I actually sat down and committed to it, and then I wouldn't be able to do anything else. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's a classic ADD behavior. Yeah. I didn't know that was, but I learned about it later. And I just learned that I had to just put, it's kind of like today when we were surfing in the Brook Street and there was some big peaks, and then the natural tendency is not to go to the main peak, it's to try and drop in on the shoulder where it seems safer, but that's actually not safer. If you go to the outer boil, to the biggest part of that wave, and roll in there, it's actually easier, scarier, because you're seeing the whole wave in front of you, and it's a big, massive wave. But if you do it that way, you can get past all the other stuff and get so much more accomplished on that wave, and you actually get a much better score. And it's the same thing, I think, in the difficult parts of work, whether it's prospecting in the business, whether it's, there's a million different parts of it, whether it's writing, whether it's whatever it is you're trying to do. And I think people with ADD fight it worse than other people who can focus more naturally. But you have to go and you have to throw yourself over that edge, and you have to just make yourself do it and do it and do it and do it over and over and over again until you get to a point where you're like, throwing myself over the edge isn't the worst thing. It's not that bad. In fact, if I do that, I get this great reward that happens. And so I'm going to intentionally go out whenever the surf is huge and pumping. I'm going to go to the outer boil because that's where the best things happen. It's also where the worst things happen. I did go over the falls pretty badly today in the final, but that's half the fun now. Yeah. It's like, wow, I probably just had the best wipeout in the contest, or one of them, anyways. Well,
it's funny. Like
that's also a crowd pleaser. Yeah.
It was funny. I got diagnosed with ADD when I was a kid, and I always had that crazy ability to hyper focus.
Right.
But then it's like, so it's either, and I'm still that way. And today, like when we go to do something, and she's like this very much too, where it's like either we are at doing something at Mach 10,
right,
or we're not doing it.
You're either fully committed or not committed at all.
Yeah, and it's just like, and that's why you
guys would be terrible managers, by the way.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, because it's like we just don't have that. It's either like we're in sixth gear, or we're not moving.
Right.
And so we just, we choose to move, but we accomplish a lot in relatively short periods of time because we're able to hyper focus. And yeah, we've definitely had to learn some balance in certain aspects of our life. But I think so many people that are trying to become successful, they go, well, I need this perfect balance between my life and my work and my kids and this. And it's like, well, no, you're not going to have that. You're not going to have balance. Like balance it really does not, in my opinion, it does not exist. Yes. Do we have?
There's a fairy tale world. There's some fairy tale version of life where, it's whatever those 50s and 60s TV shows were, where the Brady Bunch or Leave It to Beaver or whatever, where people have this, this life at home and the problems are these little minuscule problems. But it's really like no one's ever worried about the mortgage. No one ever gets fired. It's just this, happy clappy life that no one ever really exists in.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, when we look at stuff like that, I think so many people have such a false reality of where they actually think happiness is.
Right.
And what they don't realize is we're so happy when we're in gear number 6, when we're doing Mach 10. Yes, we spend time with our kids. Of course we do. That's our number one priority. But here's the difference. When we spend time with our kids, we're intentional about it. When we spend time with each other and we make sure that we cut time out for each other, we're intentional about it. When we're working, we're grinding it out. We're doing what we need to do so we get it done, and so that we could, enjoy that time with our family or whatever it is.
You also feel like you've accomplished something at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just this slow row where you're like, it's like Groundhog Day all over again. Like, what do we actually accomplish? I think the worst thing,
just like cycle.
The worst thing about Leave It to Beaver, I mean, I'm not trying to pick on Leave It to Beaver, but I remember that show growing up is June and Ward and the kids. I mean, nothing ever really happened. There was, they had these little, it was an early sitcom, and they had these little struggles every day, or some little morality tale. But at the end of the day, like the backdrop on that story never changed.
Yeah.
There was no forward progress in any real meaningful way. And to me, that life isn't very interesting.
No.
I mean, maybe some people want that, and that's fine for them. But I'm very interested in progress and transformation and breaking through barriers. That's what this podcast is about. The reason we're doing this is because a lot of people are asking me how to do that. And fear, anxiety. I mean, somebody literally just asked me, like, David, how do you deal with fear and anxiety? And I think this is really a timely conversation because we all struggle with this. There is no, I mean, the good news and the bad news is there is no easy solution, because if there were, life would kind of suck.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, what makes it spicy and interesting and exciting, what makes the, adrenaline course through our veins is the fact that we have these fears and anxieties, that life isn't easy, and that ultimately it's that pain and suffering and fear and anxiety that makes it so much more fulfilling.
Yeah.
But the key is you have to dig into it, and you have to embrace it, and you have to address it, and you have to overcome it.
Well,
is that right? I mean, by the way,
no, 100%.
I feel like I'm just saying things, and you guys are like, "Yeah, Dave, you're right," and I'm like, "Really? Like, there's nothing you want to disagree with there?"
No. I mean, the funny part is so many people, they just, and I was very much like this, where it was just, here's the destination. Once I get to this destination, then I'll be happy.
Right.
And now my perspective has changed so much over the last several years.
Well, in our business, we have rewards and recognition at different milestones.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And one of the kind of the narratives that had in the old days, and it was, when you get to this place, life's going to be great.
Yeah.
And I think what a lot of people realized is, when I get here, life doesn't really change.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
either I'm becoming better and progressing, or I'm just going to amplify the problems I have.
Yeah. I mean, you're either moving forward or moving backwards. And I think one of the biggest shifts in my life, and definitely in ours as a couple, is we're really enjoying the journey. And whatever challenge we have, we just look at that challenge as, okay, what are we supposed to learn from this? Where are we supposed to go from this? How did we get ourselves into this position? Like, it's just a different outlook. And I think if more people had that same outlook when they have a challenge, they would live a totally different life, and also enjoy the journey as they're going through everything.
Yeah, we agree with you totally, David. I mean, there's nothing to really counter on that.
That's why I have you on this podcast.
We talk a lot about, customizing our life. And so if you think of the opposite of customization, it's things that are mass produced.
Right.
And so what you're talking
Accepting
about,
what's being handed out.
Yeah.
Yep. So what you're talking about with Leave It to Beaver and The Wonder Years and whatever these shows were putting into our minds was that, there was this ideal false life, like you were saying, that we were supposed to achieve, and that would be kind of norm or success or whatever. But to me, it's just this mass.
It's the cookie cutter. Yeah. Whether it's suburban
reality.
housing or mass produced, whatever. It's everything. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
We were with Rob Bell last night with you guys, and I appreciated what he said at the end of his play reading, where he was talking.
We were watching a play that he had written that was going through a reading.
Yes.
Pete Holmes was one of the readers, which was fantastic. It was really fantastically interesting. What's a nucka?
What's a nucka?
What's a nucka?
What's a nucka?
What's a nucka? Got it. It's going to be amazing. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, we enjoyed it a lot. And at the end, Rob came out and spoke for a little bit as far as his perspective and sort of, how the inception of the whole idea behind the play. And he was talking about how life, can present you with these ladders all along the way. And it's, hey, when you're born, you're expected, to go right into the school system. And, there's a ladder that's placed in front of you to get a good grade, and you climb it. You keep climbing
all
it.
All the ladders of success.
Graduate, yeah, and then you go to a job and get good grades, get a good job. Everything's gonna be okay. And it's this
climb the ladder.
Exactly, and it's this mass-produced ideology that's what we're supposed to do.
And no one's asking. Wait a minute. Well, what's this ladder leading up against? Why am I climbing? Right? All these questions that we should be asking.
Is there another way? Right.
Well, do I even want to go where this ladder's taking me?
Exactly. Right. And so, and that's why, we've just really fought, hard to kind of, to press against those social norms. And with a lot of the people that come to us, we, first of all, they're coming to us because they want to create better lives. And then we sort of challenge those systematic ways of thinking that they've adopted as truth, and get them to kind of uncover that and unpackage that and sort of reformat them based upon, hey, what is your core value system? Where do you want to invest your time? What kind of life do you want to build, and create a new blueprint for that?
Do you encourage those people to really maybe kind of experience the wonder and mystery of the journey, of what they're going? I mean, is there a point where, because I think a lot of people are like, oh my God, I'm going to have to change. It's going to be terrible. And life, but I think really when you go through it, you start to realize, and I think that's what real success is. You go, the process of going through that and the transformation you have when you go through it. If you don't view it as pain, if you view it as, man, there is this wonder and mystery in the world, and it's all around us every day. If we will just take the time to stop climbing the damn ladder and be aware, to your point, right, Tony, being aware of how I'm interacting with things and what's coming back to me and what that means.
Yeah.
I think that ultimately that starts to kill the fear in itself, right?
Yeah.
Because you're like, wait, what is this interact? This is the thing that always struck me about these movies about scientists who are in the field. And they should be like Jane Goodall. She should be scared to death of these apes, right? Of the mountain gorillas. But she's not. I mean, maybe there's times when she has fear, but the fear doesn't really matter because she's so infatuated with the curiosity of working with these amazing animals.
Right.
That it's not about this thing killing me or not killing me. It's about what can I learn from these amazing, mountain gorillas that no one knows that I can share with the rest of the world. And that is so fundamentally important, that the fear you have of a 800-pound animal crushing you evaporates. Yeah.
Her purpose is more important to her than her fear or her, or the pain of overcoming whatever it is that she's looking to achieve. And that's what we constantly are messaging to again, the people that we work with, to shift their perspective on pain. We talk about embracing the suck a lot of the times because it's like, look,
embrace the suck.
Yeah, things are gonna suck. A big part of the journey is going to suck. But you know what? When you get over those things, you're gonna be so much more proud of yourself. you're reinventing yourself. You're building this new, this new person, and you're working towards your purpose in life, and so it's reformatting them to think about that in a different light. And I was born into a middle-class family with great parents, and I always tell people, like, look, people in my situation are very susceptible to complacency disease, because I had really good parents that really wanted the best for me in life and did everything they could to try to facilitate me, my brother and sister getting to that next platform. Well, what happens statistically to a lot of families like that is the kids get really comfortable in their comfort zone, and anything that threatens that, is they want it to get out of their life.
Right.
So they just continue on that systematic, mass-produced, path to live that type of life. And so I'm really thankful for what I went through. Of course, my dad was my hero, and it was the most tragic and emotionally gut-wrenching event I've ever been through. But I pulled out all the positives I could, and it really transformed me as a person. And I don't know that I would live my life with as much depth as I do now. I don't know if I would have challenged my comfort zone much as I have.
As one example, and I'm sure there's a lot of other ones, but just from our conversation today, you wouldn't have gone into his library and read the books and the conversations he was having with those authors in the margins.
Yep.
If he hadn't have passed away.
I'd still probably be saying, hey, that was Dad. He's just being cheesy, right? It absolutely shifted my course, and it was a redirection of my course, and I'm so thankful for that. And so
you're also really fortunate to have a father who reads a lot and writes in the margins and is an interactive reader. That's not common. Absolutely. That's awesome.
Yeah, he left a tremendous legacy for me in that sense, and so that's what we're constantly trying to share these parts of our life with people, and we really encourage other people to do the same, because our story is only going to reach so many people. Only so many people will be able to relate to Tony and Francis, but the people that can't relate to us can relate to a Dave Vanderveen, can relate to
yeah,
I mean a few, but
narrow band there. Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying, that everyone's story matters, because it can reach, because then together we can all help each other out. So just knowing that there's going to be ups and downs. Another great book on that is The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster by Darren Hardy, especially talking about anybody going into business, to understand that it's not going to be just a straight line. It's
never. It's up
curves.
And down, man.
Yeah.
Looks like a heart monitor.
Well, it's so funny, like just how your brain is wired. It's obviously to protect yourself, run away from fear. Fear is bad. Pain is bad. But we talk about it with a lot of people that we coach and mentor. There's certain pain that is actually really good and really healthy. Not physical, but just especially mental. And when you get to that point
physical
of fear,
too. You think about it, you guys are both athletes.
Yeah, exactly. Physical, when you're working out, if you don't feel pain the next day from your muscles, you didn't have a good workout. And
as a serious athlete, I know you played a lot of hockey, surfed, and as a dancer, I think one of the great benefits of kids who have been in serious sports, like at a collegiate level or at a professional level or at a at a club level, you get to a point where you realize this really awful workout is what will transform my body to deliver these unbelievable results I never thought I was capable of. That experience and process, if you've never had that, it's impossible to understand. And I think that, at least to me, it seems I've seen a lot of my friends who
you have to go through it,
who are not real athletes, who they hate working out, they get fat, they go through all the things that most of us would at this age with the food resources we have available to us, right? Versus when you realize how much more effective your body, this is a really simple example, but when you realize how much more effective your body can be when you've been in tune with it and you were in shape and you weren't carrying the weight, and it's a deep resource to pull on that allows you to embrace the pain of doing, for example, an interval workout where you're pushing as hard as you can and then backing off, pushing as hard as you can and backing off, because it's the only way you're going to fix it, right? And I think it's the same thing. You can translate that same thing to almost every area of success in your life. That until you are willing to submit yourself to a coach and a mentor, go through that pain, and then see the transformation and embrace that transformation and success. The success is more of an outcome.
Yeah.
And it's nice to have the trophy's cool, whatever, but no one really cares about the trophy. It was that transformational process and working as a team and being able to accomplish something you never thought you could have done that really matters. Yeah. And you start to realize, man, that the journey to get there is what we're all going to talk about for the rest of our lives. No one gives a shit about the trophy.
Well, and holy smokes, it makes your life exciting. You know, it really
You're doing
does.
something.
Yeah. It's like there's a great
alive.
quote, Wild at Heart, by John Eldridge. And he basically talks about, you know, connecting back with the heart of man.
Right.
You know, and just, you know, a man wants a battle to fight, a beauty to rescue, you know, and something that gives him a significance in his life. I mean, so the way that the human mind works is we just want things to be comfortable. You know, think about everything that we build in our lives, from our homes, our cars, TV, everything. It's like, okay, is everything comfortable enough?
It ruins us.
Yeah, and it literally does. It literally ruins us. And you know, just connecting, it's amazing. Like one of our favorite trips is just going out and doing camping trips, which if you asked me a couple years ago, you know, when she was like, let's go camping, I was like, let's definitely not do that at all.
That
like,
was a hard no.
Yeah, I was like, I definitely don't want to. I would sleep outside. Are you kidding me? You know, and it's not even so much that I like sleeping outside now, but I just love walking and hiking and looking around and seeing things and, you know, and just being
in the world, right?
Yeah.
Being in the environment.
Yeah, being connected to nature. And obviously surfing, we get that a ton when you're out in the
Sure.
water and you know, the waves are big and, you know, it's just there's just such a different connection that you start to have when you actually feel like you're alive.
Immersed in the world.
Yeah.
So Sarah, you know, my wife, Sarah, is not a huge fan of camping per se. I'm not throwing her under the bus here, but we did we went down the Grand Canyon on a river rafting trip last summer, or summer, well, not this year, but the summer before. And, you know, you're sleeping out on the stars on cots. There's rattlesnakes. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. It feels like you're sleeping under a hairdryer the whole time. I mean, it's so hot. And, you know, we happened to be there during one of the hottest periods of the Grand Canyon. It's like 120 degrees every day, and the water's like 50. So you're like, it's like heaven and hell. You know, the whole time it's like I'm burning. I'm freezing. I'm burning. I'm freezing. But it's awesome. It's like it is. We wouldn't have traded it for anything.
I always tell Tony, because his argument for me with camping, he's like, look, I love to be in those places. I just don't want to sleep on the floor. And I said, okay, wait a minute, but I actually don't think I want to sleep on the floor either, but we have no other option in those places, right? So it's about the experience of being there, and then you just sacrifice, you know.
Some of the British figured out safari. I mean, I'm just saying, you know. It takes a lot of porters, but man, it works out well. No, but I think, you know, I mean, I just did this. I was just in Simeulue, kind of remote northwestern Indonesia, off Sumatra in the Aceh region. And typically, we've been on trips together to Nihiwatu, which is very 5-star, remote, and you're definitely in the jungle. I mean, there's pythons and Komodo dragons and all kinds of, not Komodos, but you know, the whatever the step down from that is, the monitor lizards, big ones, all kinds of crazy stuff. And we saw a big shark one day when we were out there. Anyways, but my point is that, you know, you can be in it and also have very lovely 5-star existence. I was in Simeulue. I was living in a hut that literally had woven, you know, palm frond walls, and water buffalo 20 yards outside my door, you know, walking around, and cool. You know, no AC, no hot water, no booze, which was a big surprise to me, by the way. Unpleasant, but probably good for me. But it was cool because I was reading, you know, Simple and Deep by Bo Lozoff. I was reading Mr. Rogers' biography, which is very, you know, Zen in a way. And I was working on my meditation and some other things. So it was a perfect time for me to be in that kind of situation. Yeah. And I would just basically surf my brains out and then worked on my interior stuff. But I think the great thing about being in a simple environment is it forces you to deal with yourself and get down to the brass tacks and quit worrying about all the extraneous baloney. Yeah. And really, you know, get to the things that matter.
It quiets the noise.
So it does.
Yeah.
And there endeth the lesson.
No, again, like Tony said, those are our favorite trips because that's where true bonding occurs. And I really had to sell him on it in the beginning. You know, I said, oh, come on, like, we can't
Did he complain a lot?
He would say,
was he like a total bitch at the beginning?
Can I say, honey? Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
I knew that
was.
answer was
Sorry,
yes to
not
that.
anymore. But he, you know, I had to explain to him, because it would be like, well, but we go to Hawaii. And I said, okay, but we go into a hotel room where there's a TV.
It's not the same.
And, you know, so we have to get rid of technology. And what's extra cool is to watch our son Vincent get so dirty, and like he gets
and he loves
totally
it,
immersed in the elements.
Just loves it.
Like, we have to throw away all his clothes after the trip because he's just gotten so muddy.
Because they're so
filthy,
gnarly.
And you know, it's the same with travel. Like there's being a tourist where you're staying in a 5-star hotel and going to a city but never really interacting with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do that. You can just look at it all. You can be a spectator.
Right.
And that's tourism.
Yeah.
Or you can travel.
Yeah.
You can immerse yourself in a culture.
Right.
Yep.
You know, try and learn the language, work with people there, eat in their homes, eat the food off the street. I mean, really, sometimes it has some painful consequences, but it's, you know, but I think that's when you really are, you know, at least attempt to become a part of it, whether you really do or not. I mean, it's hard to break through a lot of cultural barriers, but I mean, one of the great things about our business, you know, our shared business together, is when you get to travel and work with people who live there, and you're in their homes, and you're learning how to communicate in their language, and you're doing this together. You learn something.
Yeah. I love the quote by Mark Twain, where he says, travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness,
exactly.
and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. And, you know, exactly what you're saying right there. It's a difference between just going to a place and staying in a box, or immersing yourself in the culture, and then what that can do, you know, especially for young people as they're developing. It's incredible.
It's everything.
It's
Travel is everything. I think, especially now. I mean, there's the school I went to, Wheaton College. You know, it's a very conservative school. It can be very narrow in its focus. And one of the great things that they started doing recently is a globalization program where they want all the kids to go out and do, as part of their 4 years, they have to go live and study abroad. And they were talking about it. Yeah, it's fantastic. They were talking about a author, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who during World War II was a Lutheran pastor who left Germany to come to the United States to be in a U.S. seminary. And then he felt called to go back to Germany because of Hitler, to oppose Hitler and to create an alternative way of studying. And the thing is, when he was in the U.S., he became open to other strains of Christian thought. And so when he went back to Germany, he didn't just go back to oppose Hitler. He went back to create this almost a non-denominational, I would almost say not quite non-religious, but almost non-religious type of seminary that was more about helping. His whole point was, look, we aren't connected together. We connect through the great goodness, the God, the whatever you want to call it. Our relationship goes up. It doesn't go across. The relationship we have across is because of this thing we have, you know, that connects us to the one thing that started it all.
Right.
And so when he goes back to Germany, of course, the German Lutheran fathers weren't so fired up about this young upstart German Lutheran pastor starting this new seminary, right? And so when the president of Wheaton, Phil Ryken, was telling me all about this, and then I was sat through a chapel, and literally a guy in the chapel was telling the story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and all the trouble it caused back in Germany when he returned.
Yeah.
I wrote a letter to the chaplain. I said, to the president, I said, this is brilliant. I just don't know if you understand what you're getting into. I don't know how much you've traveled and how much you've returned. I've done a lot. I said, you know, the great thing about this is all the kids who go out and come back will not tolerate the narrow-mindedness and the navel gazing that happens right now. And it will blow all of this apart. It will have to.
Right.
I'm just wondering if you're going to be the German church fathers when they come back, or if you're going to create a different place for them to land. And it was, I didn't get a letter back. So I'm guessing church fathers was the answer he was looking for. But I think the point is, I don't really care either, because if everyone leaves for a semester or a year, you won't be able to stop the change. The transformation will happen because we can't afford all the prejudice. We can't afford all of the narrow bias. We can't afford all the small ideas that limit us.
Yeah.
When we see the rest of the world, when we recognize that whether you're Muslim or Greek, whether you're Jew, it doesn't matter. People want the same things.
Yep.
Right. And placing them, across the sea into someone else's life and experience and existence. And there's a new play out right now on Broadway. It won a lot of awards. It's called Come From Away. And it's kind of relates to this in a sense where, it's a story about September 11th where one of the planes, or many of the planes, had to land in Canada. They got rerouted.
Oh, Nova Scotia, right?
Yeah. And
or Newfoundland?
I don't know the name of the town that the play is built around.
It's either I can't remember if it's Newfoundland or Nova Scotia. Both seem equally exotic destinations in Canada to me, and I'm sorry to all of Canada for not getting that right. But yeah.
But I know, and forgive me because I don't know all the details, but I know that generally
it was a remote northeastern part of Canada.
Yeah, and so they've built this narrative now around the plane landing there, filled with people from all different cultural backgrounds and
it's
belief
an international
systems.
flight, yeah,
and landing there, and now these townspeople are embracing them into their homes.
Thank God it was Canada.
But embracing them into their homes, and then I'm sure finding common ground, and I'm sure experiencing some friction, but ultimately,
in a moment of need, being available to the other, and learning, and they learn from it as much as the people who were benefiting from it learn from it, right?
Absolutely.
I haven't seen the play. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, and I'm sure the baseline of everything is love, and that we're all people and we're all the same.
We're all made out of people.
And we're all made out of people. Yeah. I love that. I mean, it's funny on a very, very, very micro level. I experienced that myself, being that my father was military, living in so many different states growing up.
Sure.
And the biggest shift was, going from Alabama and a small town to New York City. And so
Big
everybody
Apple.
in Alabama, every time I go back home to visit, they're like, they call me a Yankee and have their ideas about New York. And then every time I'm in New York, or when I first moved to New York, especially, people would be like, "Oh, you're from Alabama? Does everyone have their teeth down?" I mean, I would hear the craziest
stuff.
stuff.
Your sister, your brother,
right? Like, do people,
If a couple in Alabama get divorced in New York, are they still brother and sister?
I mean, but I'm not kidding. That's the kind of stuff I would hear, and from people who
But wait, are
felt
they actually still brother and sister?
David, from people who felt that they were very cultured New Yorkers, right? Because of course New York. So
they have no idea. But they're just as parochial as
exactly. So it's just interesting. Travel is I feel so necessary to becoming a fully evolved.
We're all parochial, and it's only by travel and exposure that we hopefully start to remove that small-mindedness that we have, those barriers we have to our own beliefs.
Yeah, there's so much obviously more that brings us together than actually divides us. And until you actually travel and get to experience that, you don't know that. And it's so funny how people, wherever they are, they could be in Middle America, obviously major cities, New York, LA, whatever, if they have not traveled.
No, it doesn't happen in California.
Yeah, of course not. But they just have, these ideas that, they have their own prejudices. About other parts of the world, how people think, how people operate. And
right.
it's really sad, especially, it's amazing how easy it is to connect with people with social media and technology, but how many people actually aren't connected.
Well, how many people use it as a barrier to defend their own beliefs because they can't be vulnerable?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But that's a whole nother topic.
But maybe we can wrap it up there. But I think, what I've taken away from this is that, it's that creating a place in your own team, your own group, your own world where you demonstrate vulnerability so that other people can practice it themselves.
Yeah.
That allows for interior change. That ultimately allows for people to have exterior success.
Yeah.
Is that a fair summary of what we talked about?
People need to feel that they could actually do something, and they're not going to feel that they could do something if they see somebody that's perfect.
Yeah.
Or that's perceived to be perfect.
Utopias never work.
Yeah. You know, so I mean, the way that you speak life into people is by being vulnerable and telling them really what's happened in your life, and really, you know, walking them through things because you've experienced those things, but not because you say, hey, you know,
Here's the rules.
I'm Dutch and I'm 6'4" and I'm perfect and I walked off of GQ magazine. That just doesn't. I was kidding about the Dutch part. We know Dutch people aren't perfect.
Whoa.
But seriously, man, it's like when you look at it, nobody relates to that story. People relate to people that have gone through struggle. Those are the stories that we're attracted to, and the more vulnerable people are, and if you understand when you're going through that process of change, of struggle, that is that's the part of your life that the best stuff happens.
Apocalypse is okay as long as there's redemption at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's what makes life so great, is when you're willing to share your heart with people, and then that's when you're truly showing up and being authentic in your world. And not only does it serve you well, but it is going to serve the world around you well. And I did just look up the play, and you were right. It is Newfoundland, the small town of Gander. And I love what it says, because it says the musical has been received by audience and critics as a cathartic reminder of the capacity for human kindness, even in the darkest of times, and the triumph of humanity over hate.
Let's go see that together.
Yeah.
Also, let's go to Gander, Newfoundland.
Okay.
No.
We're going to go camping in Newfoundland.
We just did this whole bit on travel, honey.
Yeah.
We're going to Gander.
We're going to go to Gander, and we're going to do some camping, Tony.
That's great.
I like it.
I'm so
That'd be
excited.
That'd be pretty rad to meet the
I'm into it. No, I'm into it.
musicals.
Let's do a podcast there. It'd be really, really fun.
Nice.
So, thank you, Tony and Francis. This has been
thank you.
This has been a great experience. I hope I think everyone's going to enjoy this, and if they don't need to listen to it. But this has been the Kick Aspirational Podcast. It's interactive. I love your direct messages, your questions, your comments, and deeply appreciate the journey that we're all on. Please engage and help us all become better. Thank you. Be Kick Aspirational.